producing the product. That is their core business. They're not in the business of running townships,
yes,
or
hospitals
or schools or things like that. That's not their core business. What you find happening in some countries, and I fear we're seeing it more and more happening here in Mongolia, particularly around Oyu Tolgoi, is that if the government is not delivering, all of the demands get placed on the company. At the end of the day, then the company has more power in that area than the government does. And so effectively you can say then the mining company becomes the de facto government. And I think it's a very negative trend. The government needs to take responsibility for supplying the social services which are its mandate. You know, the company's mandate is to be a mining company. The government's mandate is to supply the social services and infrastructure necessary for community development and growth.
Or if the local community do not receive, they look for another means to suck the government, that company to, you know, to
That's
get
right.
the money
They will always take their
That's what's happening in
companies.
Mongolia all around. And instead of the central government distributing that money, the local authorities make sure that these companies pay for them. Otherwise, they will not give a good time for them to operate.
Well, I think the concern is that if the company says, no, I'm sorry, that's not our responsibility, that's the role of the government, and people continue to be discontented, then the communities might take out their frustrations on the company and close the roads and stop it from operating, which we see happening in many countries.
We talked about the sharing of tax from that company among private and local and central government. Can we talk about, in general, legal tax environment of Mongolia compared with other countries? Is it very high? What kind of problems do we have here?
Well, if we exclude the windfall profits tax, Mongolia's base taxes are actually quite, in fact, very competitive internationally. They are generally lower than what we see around the rest of the world. But when you factor in the fact that the government is going to take 34% ownership, then the total share of the profits that end up in the hands of the government in Mongolia is higher than most other countries. So if, for example, a project which is not a strategic deposit, which doesn't have state equity, then in fact they have a very competitive tax regime here. But those that are operated, which are the strategic deposits, is not so competitive because of the state equity requirement. But I think that certainly the smaller companies benefit from the tax environment, but the larger companies do not.
There was a recently very strong attempt by the Australian government to increase tax. What had happened? What was that tax about?
What they attempted to introduce was a very sophisticated tax based on what we call a rate of return. And generally these taxes are called resource rent taxes. It is a type of tax which only applies once the company has achieved a certain level of return on its investment. And so therefore only applies at generally higher levels of profit. Australia's attempt to introduce that tax was certainly was fought very hard by the industry because they felt that the government had chosen such a low level of profitability. So it said only 6%, for example. So if your profit was 6% of your invested capital, then anything above that you had to pay this higher tax rate. So generally the industry said, well, that's far too low. I'm better off just leaving the money in the bank than investing in a risky mine. So therefore it was all about this risk premium. What should that rate of return be before the higher tax rate cuts in? And there has been a discussion of resource rent taxes here in Mongolia. Most people are unaware of it. But certainly in the context of the Oyu Tolgoi agreement, there was a discussion about how do they apply taxes in the event of super high profits. So it has been discussed, it has been looked at here. The Ministry of Finance is aware of these types of taxes.
So overall we have a lot of problems to solve in mining industry.
I wouldn't say a lot of problems. I think they are all necessary challenges. They're all part of the process. I wouldn't want to characterize it that Mongolia is bad in some way, because I don't think it is. You know, you're having massive levels of investment. It can't be too bad. Otherwise, people wouldn't be investing.
You are a very optimistic person, Mr. Hancock. Thank you very much for coming to our program. It was so interesting to learn more about mining and mining tax system in the country and other countries as well.
Thank you, Jacob.
Thank you very much.
Таны төлөө эх орн чинь юу хийж чадах вэ гэж асуухаас өмнө та өөрөө эх орныхон төлөө юу хийж чадах вэ гэж асуу. Young Federal